This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Nun Vav, and all the learning for this month. The month of Teves has been generously sponsored by a close friend of the Daf as Chos Alias Neshama for Aryeh ben Ya'akov V'siyata Deshmaya. The learning of the entire Chabura should bring Aryeh ben Ya'akov to a higher place in Gan Eden Shalmaila, closer to the Kisei HaKavod, and ultimately be a Melat Yosher for his entire family and the Klal Yisrael. We are holding on the first wide line of Nun Hey Amid Beis as the Gemara quotes a brisa which really furthers the din in the Mishnah. The Mishnah at the end discussed the case of Gazlanim that broke the wall of the enclosure and the animal got out and damaged. And what is the chiyuv tashlumim in such a case? Nifrtza balayla, oy shepartzu alistim, said the Mishnah of Yatzav Hezeka, then the halacha is pater. Why is it pater? Because their owner did what he had to do, and now this guy came and broke down the fence, etc. Says the Gemara Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Amar Rav Yeshua arba devarim. There are four things. Ha'isa oisan. One who does them is pater midine adam v'chayev b'dine shamayim. Four entities that if one performs these cases, there's a patur midine adam, but a chayev b'dine shamayim. And of course, this explains the reason for the din in the Mishnah. And the simple understanding is why? Because it is a grama but nizakin. It's a indirect damage. If someone goes and breaks down the fence in someone else's corral, in someone else's backyard, and that guy's animal goes and damages, it's a grama but nizakin. I didn't directly cause damage. And that's the simple reason why there's a patur b'dinei adam. However, in as much as you cannot bring him to Bezdin to collect, chayiv b'dinei shamayim. B'dinei shamayim, in the world of heaven, one is obligated, which many different explanations what exactly that means. But the simplest way to understand it is that Bezdin cannot obligate this guy to pay, but one has to pay. There's a real obligation. Ve'elu hein, what are these four cases, which of course is the case in our Mishnah. If someone knocks down the fence in front of the animal of his friend, someone who literally kaifev is he bends over the grain of his friend and it gets damaged in front of a fire. Number three, someone who hires false witnesses to testify. And number four, someone who knows edus for his friend but does not testify. Four cases in which damage is caused indirectly. In all of these cases, it says Rav Yeshua, the halacha is pater midine adam, but is a chiyuv midine shamayim. And of course, now in classical Gemara sense, we're going to delve into each of these cases one by one. Amar, case number one. Ha pirates geder mipnei behemas chaverai hechidami. What exactly is the case when someone breaks down the fence in front of his friend's animal? Says the Gemara in the last line of Nun Hamid base. If the case is that it is a strong fence, b'dinei adam, namine chayiv, that he should even be chayiv dinei adam. Why should he be chayiv dinei adam? So we look at Rashi. Rashi says, Mia hakoisel, you should be obligated to pay for the wall, to be a dayim avad, because that is damages that were wrought with his hands. So what is the reason why the Brisa says pater midinei adam? Ella, says the Gemara, what must the case in the Brisa be as we turn over to Nun Vav Amid Aleph? Says the Gemara, must be Bekaisel Reuya. It must be, it is a rickety, a not strong wall, a wall that would have fallen. Now you go and you knock down that wall, thereby contributing to its demise, thereby hastening the animal being able to leave and do damage. And therefore you did not, as Rashi says, cause the owner a loss by breaking the wall. The loss that only happened is the animal went down and damaged. And therefore the halacha is Pater midine Adam v'chayiv b'dine Shamayim, case number 1. Continues the Gemara in the top line of Nevavam and Aleph. Amar mar hakoifiv koimasa shachavera mimnei adleika. Someone bends over the standing grain of his friend in front of a fire. Says the Gemara again, let's understand what this case is. Hey chidami, what's the case? Ilem, if you're going to tell me, dematile beruach mitsuya, if the case is that he bent it over and a regular wind now is going to cause the fire to consume it. Again, that's called direct damage. That you did something that directly results in this item being burnt, and therefore you should be obligated b'dini adam. It must be that the fire only reached this grain via an abnormal wind, and therefore it's a grama, and that's the reason why one is pater b'dini adam. V'chayev b'dinei shemayim. Rav Ashi Amar, a second teretz in this case. Tamun itmar. It's a case of tamun, of hidden items. Mishum deshavye, you created it to being tamun ba'esh. And Rashi explains on the last wide line, shekisa kamas chaveiroi b'sadinim. Your friend's grain was sitting out, and kishara daleko, you saw a fire coming at slop. So what did you do? You covered over the grain. You thought, I can't save his stuff. You know what? I'll cover it over. At least I'll do something. And what happened is, the halacha is that any time something is covered, then the Bala Daleka, the one who burnt it, is pater. So you caused him a loss, because now he can't collect with his grain. But that's the halacha that you're going to be pater midini adam v'chayev b'dinei shamayim. Amar mar, 8 lines down, we continue with the third case of Rabbi Yeshua. Someone who hires false witnesses, says the Gemara, if the case is that one is in a dintayra, Ruvain is in dintayra against Shimon, and Ruvain goes and hires witnesses to testify and thereby extracts and collects money from Shimon, says the Gemara, you have to pay, then you have to pay back the money that you got incorrectly. You caused Shimon to pay illegally, so you have to pay that back. This isn't just Dinei Shamayim. Dinei Adam, you should have to pay. You directly caused him the loss. What must the case be? That you hired false witnesses to testify for a third party, and that's the case that's considered a grama. Number 4 says the Gemara, if one knows testimony for his friend but does not testify, says the Gemara, what is the case? If we're saying that he was one of 2 witnesses, that he could have testified it with someone else and he did not, says the Gemara, Pshita, that of course he's chayiv b'dinei shamayim. Why? De'araisahu, cause he violated a din in de'araisa, says in the Torah, lo yagiv nasa avaynai. If you don't testify and you have to carry the sin. So what is the chiddush? Again, in this 4th case, a little bit of a different question. The first 3, and figuring out the case, we asked that it's more direct damages, and you should be chayiv even b'dinei adam in a regular court. Now the Gemara is asking that no, this is a case that's pashit. It's a pasuk in the Torah, so of course you're chayiv b'dinei shamayim. Ella, says the Gemara, bechad, that he was a singular witness, and therefore you could have been mechayiv someone else a shavua, which is the din of a eid echad, and you did not. Therefore, that is called the indirect damages, and that is why you only have to pay b'dinei shamayim. That is the 4 cases of Rabbi Yeshua. That one did not cause direct damage, an extension of our Mishnah of breaking down the fence front of one friend's animal, and the animal went into damage, and the halacha being pater midinei adam, who does not have to pay in a regular court, but chayev midinei shamayim, he is chayev, obligated midinei shamayim. Asks the Gemara, we're 10 lines down, the first word in line is Ella Bechad. Visulaka. Are there no other cases? Anytime we list a number of cases in a Mishnah and a Brisa, it seems to indicate that these are the only cases. Are there no others? Ask the Gemara, V'ha'ika. But there are other cases, and the Gemara list a whole list. Number one, ha'iseh melacha b'mei chatas, one who does work with the waters of the chatas, the ashes of the parah aduma, that are mixed together with the water that you sprinkle, that you're not allowed to do malacha with them, with paras chatas, or with the parah itself. In these two cases, you would thereby invalidate and apostle up the mechatas, the parah aduma, because work is not allowed to be done. In these cases, pater midinei adam, number one, v'chayev midinei shamayim. Case number two, you freed your friend's animal poison. Number three, we send a fire in the hands of someone who is a deaf mute, an imbecile, or a child. Number four, you frighten, you scare your friend, and thereby he gets damaged. Number five, a case that we've had, a lot of these cases we had, well, only one by the Nishras Kadai versus Arabim, if your jug breaks in Rishus Arabim, Laisalka, and you don't remove it, Nafla Gamla, your camel falls, Laimida, and you don't stand it up. Rameir is Machayev Hezekon. Whereas so ask the Gemara, we have 5 different cases. That is the exact same din as Yeshua ben Levi. So why did you teach only those 4? Answers the Gemara about 20 lines before the white lines in. Yes, it is true that there are other cases that fit this bill of Tuva. So why do we list these 4? These 4 were listed to teach a specific chiddush in each one of them. So what is that chiddush? In these 4 cases, there's a reason to think, as the Gemara is now going to explain, that even in Dinei Shamayim, one does not have to pay. Kamash Malan, that even B'Dinei Shamayim, there is a chiyuv. Now, what is the reason in the 4 cases? Explains the Gemara. Number 1. Since anyways, the fence is going to break. Why? It's a rickety fence, like we said on top of the Amid. So I would have thought, I thought you mamish did nothing. You bent over the stalks of your friend before the fire. Nami, I would have thought, as we explained, only via Ruach She'eina Mitzuya is the grain damage. So I would think I can tell you what I have to worry about a Ruach She'eina Mitzuya. That's an abnormal wind. So I should not even be obligated to Dinei Shamayim. Kamashlan, there you are. Rav Ashi Damar, that the case number 2 of a Kaifiv Kamasa is what? A case of Talmud, that you put a sheet over your friend's grain to stop it from the fire. Nami Talmud Itmar. That what? I would have thought, Ano Kisui Nehalech. I would have thought that what did I do? All I did was I went and I covered the grain. I was doing you a favor. So you're going to tell me that what ended up happening is it got burnt and now you can't collect because it was Talmud, because it was hidden. So you want to say I'm chayiv? I didn't do anything. I tried to help you. Kamash that you're chayiv b'dinei shamayim. And number 3, someone who hires false witnesses. We said the case was by Eid Echad. I would have thought Lema, Divir, have Divir Talmud. Divir Mishaimim. Why did he listen to me? I don't understand. Yes, went over to Ruvain, and I said, can you testify falsely on behalf of someone else? And he did. And then as a result, the ball kept on rolling, and then you, Shimon, got damaged because you couldn't make a shvuah, etc. But says, why did he listen to me? I have a taina. Why did the 8 sheker listen to me? Divir Rav. Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishayim, he should have listened to Hashem, and therefore, but didn't Shayim Nami Chayiv. I would think I'm not Chayiv at all, Kamashlan that you are. And the fourth case, I this Chaver Veina Mei Eloi, Nami, I would have thought Ma'u, the Tema Mi Emar, Techehavim is Adina Lei, Have Maida. If we see a case in which I know it is my friend and I didn't give it, so I could taina as well. Ma'u the Tema. How should I have known that if I would have testified, he would have been moida and he would have paid? Maybe he would have sworn falsely. So maybe my lack of testimony didn't result in anything. Kamash Malan, the chiddush of these four cases. Yes, there are other cases of Pater b'dinei Adam v'chai b'dinei Shamayim, but these four cases were listed specifically to teach that even though there are svaras in each of the four, really five, including Rav Ashi, why even b'dinei Shamayim one would be Pater, Kamash Malan, that he is chayiv. And we continue 4 lines from the Y line, quoting the case of the Mishnah, Nifritza Balayla, Aisha Partzua listed, Amar Rabba V'hu Shechatra. What's the case over here that the fence was broken at night, or robbers broke through the fence, and then what happened was the animal got out and damaged, so the owner that woke up to have a breached fence and his animal running amok doing damage, owner is Pater. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, this din in the Mishnah applies V'hu Shechatra, where the animal dug underneath the wall. In such a case, that is the case in which the owner is going to be Pater. Avaloi Chatra, but if the animal did not dig underneath the wall, rather the wall fell down, Ma'udeteim Chayiv, then the owner would be a chayiv. Says the Gemara, Hechi Dami, what exactly is the case over here? If we're talking about a sturdy wall, Kiloi Chatra, my chayiv. If it's a sturdy wall, so then if the animal did not dig underneath the wall, am I chayiv? Why would the owner be chayiv? I made a good shmira. I put up a good fence. Now, what happened? What happened is a robber came and left the door open. A robber came and nifritza balayla. So why would I be chayiv? Why should I be chayiv? My havalei mevad. What more could I have done? Let's just see one Rashi for a moment, just to really open up the sugya. Rashi says, V'hu shechatra. Hadit Tanan, says Rashi, that which we learned in the Mishnah, Nifritza b'layla Pater, ki goin shechatra behema ve'ipila ha'koisel de'onusu. So Rashi is saying that the case of the Mishnah of Nifritza b'layla, in which the robbers came and broke through, and then, or the fence stam was broken, those are the cases that he's Pater is when it was a complete oinus. So now the Gemara should understand what's going on over here. If I made a good fence and then a completely unavoidable mishap happens, why would I be chayiv? What else could I have done? Elo, what must be going on over here, says the Gemara in the first Y line, Bekaisel Ru'uya. It's a rickety wall. So ask the Gemara 1 second, if it's a rickety wall, ki chatra, if the animal dug underneath the wall, am I Pater? So now the opposite kasha. What's the reason I'm not chayiv? This is a classical case that I did a bad shmir. I didn't watch the animal properly. I put up a bad fence. And then what ended up happening was, my luck was that the fence didn't fall, and rather the animal dug underneath it. But that's a case that it ended as unavoidable, but it started as a pshia. So says the Gemara in the second line, Hanich leman damras, of course, is a massive machlaikes. According to the man damar that also chas with pshia of sefer b'ainis is Pater. Okay, then we can understand what you Rabba is saying, that the din in the Mishnah is a shechatra. Elaman damar chas with pshia of sefer b'ainis chayim ha'ik lemeimar. Says the Gemara, so you have to say elamas nisan be'kaisel bari. You have to say the Mishnah is talking about a strong wall. And the owner is Pater, even if the animal did not dig underneath it. Even if the animal, the wall collapsed and the animal just walked out, the owner's potter. Why? Because he did what he had to do. The fact that Nifrit Sabalayla is not the owner's problem. So what's Rabbah talking about on the fourth Y line? We had it all wrong. Rabbah was talking about the end of the Mishnah. What did the end of the Mishnah say? If you put the sheep in the sun or gave it over to Chayiv on this, Amar Rabbah, Va'afilu Chatra. Even if the end result was the animal dug underneath the wall, the fact that you left the animal in a precarious position in the middle of the sun or gave it over to someone who's not responsible, so you're going to be Chayiv. And concludes this part of the Gemara, we'll call the second part of today's shir. It's posh if the animal did not dig, that the owner is chayiv because it's a complete negligence. That's the chiddush nami. Maybe I would have thought this is a case that it started off as a pshia and ended as an aynes. Kamash Milan, that what? A kula pshi. No, it's all one big pshia. Why? The animal dug underneath the fence. Because my time made the others give the shavkins v'chama. You should have realized that you leave an animal in the middle of the sun. You put an animal in a situation which it's in pain, whatever it could potentially do, any scheme, any tactic, it's going to do, and therefore, that's the reason why it's not Sefer Ba'ines, but it's considered Kulai Bibshia. We continue as we conclude this Amid. So let's say part 2. Part A of today's share were the 4 cases of Grama Ben Izakin. Part 2 was understanding the second part of the Mishnah, Nivsa B'Lashur Listim. And now part 3 is Aitzio Listim, Listim Chayavim. If the robbers take the animal out, what is the din? The din is that the robbers are chayiv. And with that, we turn over to Nunvav Amid Beis. It says the Gemara, what exactly is the chiddush of this line of the Mishnah? Pshita, says the Gemara. It's obvious. Kivan da'afka, da'afkua. Since the robbers, what do? They took the animal out. Kivan da'afkua. Since the robbers took the animals out, Kaimaleo, Bershu Sayu, they're in the robbers, the Ganavins, Rishos L'chol Mili. So of course, the robbers are going to be the one that is obligated. What is the chiddush of the Mishnah? Explains the Gemara, Lo Yitzricha, the chiddush is the Kamula Be'apa. The case is where the robbers stood in front of the animals, they blocked the animal, and thereby the animal walked out of the corral. I mean, they didn't actually take it out. Look at Rashi in the second line explains, Shloima Shchua, they didn't pull the animal out. They stood on all 4 sides and 3 sides of the animal. Rather to go and eat the grain. So that is the chiddush, and in this case, even without a Mashiach, the robbers are chayiv. Why? To Amar Rabba, Kihad Amar Rabba, like Rabba taught, Amar Master Amar Rav. Hama'amid behemas chaveiroi al kamas chaveiroi chayiv. If you stand your friend's animal on your friend's grain, you're obligated. Ma'amid pshita. You stood in front of the animal, so you didn't physically pull, you didn't physically push, prod, or make the animal be on top of the grain. You just directed it there. So that's the chiddush that you're going to be chayiv. Amar le'Av Rav Yosef, Hekisha amritlan. You discuss the case was that you hit the animal. Another way of learning, not that you just stood in front of the animal, but rather you hit the animal, causing the animal to eventually go and do damage. And we continue, which will be the 4th and final part of today's shir. If you give over the animal to Araya, to a shepherd, then he assumes all the dinim just like the owner. Says the Gemara Amri, 7 lines down, the 2 dots, Tachtov Diman. Says the Gemara, what does it mean that the Raya takes his place? Takes whose place? Like we just said, Tachtav the Baal takes over for the owner. Then what? Behema. Tachtav the Baal Behema. Tanina Chada Zimna. We already learned this din once before. What do we learn? Masur al Shaimer. You give it over to Shaimer. Chinan l'shayel l'noisei sachar l'aseicher. Kula nechlesu tachas bailim. So we already knew this din. Ela tachtav the Shaimer. Rather, the Mishnah must mean that the shepherd takes the place of the Shomer. Now, what's the case? The case of the Mishnah is that the owner gave it to a Shomer. And the Shomer then goes and gives it to the shepherd. And the Chiddush of the Mishnah is that the shepherd takes over the place of the Shomer. Alatachtav the Shomer. The Shomer kama ipater la. And therefore, ask the Gemara, if Shomer kama ipater la gamri, 1 second. If I give it to a shemer, the shepherd gives it to the shepherd. Is that shemer potter? This would seemingly be a kasha on Rava. 3 lines from the white lines. So if you're telling me that the whole chiddush of the Mishnah is that I gave it to the shemer and the shemer gave it to the shepherd, and the shepherd is potter. The shemer, is potter. That's a steer to Rava that says shemer the shemer is chayif. Answers the Gemara. Amalacha Rava. Rava explains 2 lines from the white lines. My masru l'raya. What does that mean? Lebarzile. What this means is to his apprentice. To orche deraya lememsar lebarzile. And the reason why he's completely potter, it's not a regular case of a shemer giving it over to someone else. It's the shemer who's a shepherd giving it over to his apprentice. And therefore, since it's normal, that's where even Rava will agree that the shemer will be potter in this case. Ikedi Amri, says the Gemara, we conclude, Midiktani Masur L'Raya, V'Lokitani Masur La'acher, Shema Mina Mai Masur, Masur L'Raya to shepherd, Masur L'Raya, Lebarzile, to Orche, says the Gemara, it must be that you gave it to the apprentice, which is normal D'Raya. Lememsa Lebarzile, Avala Acher, but if you gave it to someone else, it would seem we have a Raya Lai. So now it comes out as a Raya to Rava, Damar Rava. Rava taught Shemer Shemas Shemer is chayiv, and it would seem that our Mishnah is saying the same thing. The only potter because it's the roya and the apprentice. Amri loy damorcha demosakatani v'adin la'acher. No, you can't be medayik not la'acher. Maybe the same din would apply to an acher. Why did the Mishnah say the case of apprentice? Because that is the normal case. We'll pick it up from the Itmar the next year. B'siyata dishmaya.